Welcome to Off the Page, the show where we talk with Colorado authors to get the story behind the story. I'm Stacy McKenzie, a librarian here at Mamie Doud Eisenhower Public Library in Broomfield, and today we are so pleased to have Molly Kate Brown on the show with her book, Learning to Walk in India, a Love Story. Molly, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
The first thing I like to ask my guests is, what are you doing when you're not being an author?
So when I'm not being an author, I am taking care of patients in the emergency room as a nurse practitioner, doing various things like sewing them up, helping them with their pneumonia, their chest pain, their belly pain, whatever it is. So that's what I do for work now. I took care of cardiac patients for a long time before I worked in the emergency room. So I consider myself both literally and figuratively a connoisseur of matters of the heart, if you will.
That's great. That's a great way to put that. So we got to talk about this wonderful book.
Okay, let's do that.
Learning to Walk in India, a Love Story. Tell me what kind of audience you would say is ideal for the book that you're writing.
So while I don't want to limit my audience, because I think both men and women can get something from the book, I feel like it is sort of a little bit of a chick flick, and probably women aged 35 to 70 are probably the audience.
Okay,
but
great.
And men can still read it.
And we don't want to limit at all,
No.
but the ideal, the perfect.
That's the
perfect
ideal.
spot. Wonderful. So let's talk about the book. Tell me
Okay.
about the story that goes on in this book, especially the love story part.
Okay, wow. Okay, so the story, I traveled to India back in 2006 after I got married, and I had been planning the trip prior to meeting my husband, and when we met, we decided that he would come along for the first month as the honeymoon, then I would go on to do what I needed to do there, which was doing some traveling, doing some meditating, and volunteering. And so he and I went. We had our month together there, which was wonderful and lively, and you can read about it in the book. And then within 24 hours after he left India to come back to Boulder as planned, I developed an illness called reactive arthritis that resulted from a dysentery I got while I was in India, which landed me in the hospital, unable to walk by myself in Mumbai. And when I was lying in that hospital bed, I knew I was going to write a book about it. And so that is sort of how the story was born.
Wow. So you were in the hospital for how long?
I ended up being in the hospital for almost 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
And then got out of the hospital and spent about another week in a hotel there to get strong enough to get on a plane to fly home.
Oh, wow. And so 2 weeks in a hospital in Mumbai, India.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know, what did you think about maybe the comparison between healthcare in the United States and healthcare in India, especially in a hospital?
Yeah, so great question. And I would say that healthcare in India, present day, is sort of, you could compare it to what healthcare was here in the 50s. And what I mean by that isn't necessarily their technology, because I think that's probably similar at this point, but the relationships, for example, the way that doctors and nurses interact. In India right now, nurses are definitely subservient. It's still that doctor is God kind of dynamic. Patients aren't as educated, they don't really ask as many questions. And so I think that was what I really noticed, as a then nurse, now a nurse practitioner. Yeah.
But the care itself, you felt was
the care itself was actually quite wonderful. I was well taken care of by the physicians. They actually figured out what I had fairly quickly. They had to bring in sort of the chief physician of the hospital to work on my case, but they did figure that out, and I felt like I got excellent care. They really took good care of me.
And you talked about in another interview I heard you had a great doctor.
Oh, I had a couple of fantastic doctors, but one in particular, I still need to get back to India to hand him a copy of the book and give him a big hug. He has no idea that there was a book written with him in it.
Because that's important, I think,
absolutely,
to know that they do have good health care, especially if people are considering traveling there.
Well, yeah, interestingly enough, the hospital that I was in, which is called Breach Candy Hospital in Mumbai, it's probably the biggest hospital in India, and a lot of people travel there to do the whole medical tourism thing. So if you need a hip replacement and you can't afford it here, people will go there and have these things done. And they actually go to that hospital for medical tourism. So Yeah, pretty top notch.
Well, what drove you to go to India in the first place? Why was that going to be
good
your
question.
destination?
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, I felt really drawn to go, and I don't think I can verbalize exactly why I felt really drawn to go, but I think it probably arose from this meditation practice that I had become involved with, whose sort of roots are in India, and I just started to feel really called to go explore the country, and so I went.
Just as a side, what would you tell people about traveling in India? If people were hesitant about going there because of rumors, things they've heard about the cleanliness, the people, maybe the food and getting dysentery and things like this, what advice would you give to somebody who's considering maybe going to India?
So I think that probably depends on the person I was talking to. If it was somebody who was a little more who had a little more fear about some of these things, I would probably say travel with a group, you know, go on a tour where you can be set up, it's organized, it's spelled out for you. You don't have to think about how you're getting from one place to another. You know, the hotels are all booked, the sites where you're going are all booked. If you're more of an adventurous type and you want to throw caution to the wind, I'd still say travel with somebody, but you know, don't have too much of an agenda. I mean, obviously know some of the places you're going, but you know, go there and be more spontaneous, for sure. And India is an intense place, and everybody wants to talk to you, and you know, it's very intense in that way. So.
But you did say you'd like to go back.
I do want to go back, and I definitely won't go alone.
Yeah,
that's for sure. I'll probably do it a little bit differently this time.
Do you think your husband will go with you? Would go back with you?
I think he would.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's great. What is his take from the experience that you had there, considering that he had to come back here and then you got ill?
Yeah, and then he had to turn around and fly back within 24 hours to come get me.
So how was that? What does he
well,
relate the experience?
You know, I think that's a question I would probably have to ask him, and it's a really great question. I think that you know, I don't think he'd want to do it again. But I do think that, you know, we were newlyweds when this happened, and all of a sudden my husband of 3 months is, I'm just going to say it, changing my diaper. And so, you know, I think that it made us a lot stronger, and we got to know each other really quickly. And I think that he would probably say that he, you know, is happy to not go through it again. But I don't think either of us would do it differently.
Okay, that's great. That's a great way to look back on it all.
Yeah.
So the illness that you had with that infection, do you have any lasting issues with it? Does it affect you at all?
Yeah, so it does actually. And I mean, I live a very normal, pain-free life, and I'm quite active. However, there is still a pretty big immunosuppressant medication that I take as a result of that, and I hope to get off of that one day. But to date, when I have tried to actually wean myself off of that medication, I'll have, you know, some inflammation that returns, and so it sort of makes it necessary for me to be on the medication. And while I am a nurse practitioner, I work in Western medicine. I, you know, prior to this situation, I'd never had to take any type of medication, and I wasn't a fan of them. And at this point in my life, you know, it's funny when you go through something, your take on it changes completely, because now it's, you know, I am all about quality of life and whatever it takes to get there.
Yeah.
I'll do it.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Very good.
my tune has changed for sure.
Very good. Very good. So let's talk about when living in Boulder, and it relates to what you kind of went to India for, which was the meditation. And you say that you discovered meditation in Boulder. Tell me about that journey. Yeah,
so you know, I feel like prior to actually discovering a formal practice of meditation, I'd always been what I would consider fairly inwardly focused, and it was just something that was a curiosity of mine and something I'm inclined toward. And I was going through a bit of a difficult time in my life. I was in a relationship that wasn't serving me then, and I would say I was suffering probably. And I was going to this therapist, and I was asking myself what's wrong with me, and she told me about meditation, and told me I should meditate. And within a few days, I met a woman who told me about this 10-day silent meditation called Vipassana. And as soon as she told me about it, I knew I would attend, and actually did within a few months of then. and had the sense that if I could just get to this meditation retreat, everything would be fine.
Yeah.
And it was, in fact, it changed my life, and I am incredibly grateful for sort of being turned on to that path, if you will.
And have you done that again? Have you done the 10-day again?
I have actually. I have, so I was 28 then, I'm now 42, and I have done one or more of the 10-day retreats every year. It's something I do every year.
Okay.
And I even went and did a 20-day course once. And yeah, it's a huge part of my life. I feel like it's like necessary.
Yeah.
You know, like it's not optional, it's like part of the healthcare thing.
And how did meditation help you get through this time in India in the hospital and during your recovery?
So one of the benefits of the meditation is that you know, we learn how to not spend so much time in the thinking part of the mind, but actually hang out in the body with just kind of what's going on. And you know, that is really helpful when you're dealing with a situation where there's a lot of fear and it's incredibly intense, because the mind can, you know, do some really crazy things, and all of a sudden you're walking down the path of what if this happens, what if this happens, what if I die here? And instead of doing all of that, if we just kind of learn to actually, you know, sharpen the tool of being able to stay in the body and you know, stay more present, life is a lot easier. It's not quite as much swimming upstream. So while I still suffered in the hospital, and I still had moments of feeling overwhelmed, out of control, incredibly scared, you know, I feel like I was able to hold it together pretty well for the most part because of the tools that I had. Like, I think it would have been horrific had I not already had the meditation tool.
Sure, that helps everything. So Molly, this was a life-threatening illness.
Well,
am I correct?
You know, I think that it could have been had I not gotten, I mean, yes, it would have been had I not gotten into the hospital and gotten the proper treatment. You know, I mean, because the infection, sepsis, that kind of thing, you know, but it's a very treatable condition, and most people actually go on and do very well, and you know, people who don't have a gene I have actually tend to get over this. I just happen to have a gene that makes it more of a chronic thing for me, which is why I'm still actually probably dealing with it.
Okay, so yeah, serious
so
on many levels.
Yeah,
but you came through, you're doing
absolutely,
well now. I think people often in memoirs say that they learn things about themselves, they came to conclusions, they learned a lot of new things. What types of things did you learn about yourself, or experiences did you learn from having this?
So another great question. You're full of great questions. And so just to clarify, what I will say is that this has been a process. I didn't learn all this while I was in the hospital dealing with this. You know, I mean, I came home, I couldn't walk for a year, and then I've spent a lot of years, you know, it's been 9 or almost 10 years since then. Gosh, or maybe 11. But so it's sort of been a process that all of this has kind of sunk in. But what I will say is that, you know, illness is a really great opportunity to sort of interact with ourselves in a different way, and to actually have the time to go places that we aren't otherwise going because we're so busy living our life, you know, fairly quickly. And when you're forced to stop, you actually have a lot of time to sort of go into the inner journey in a way you might not be doing otherwise. And so what I would say is that I really believe we're not who we often take ourselves to be. We're a lot bigger than that, and a lot, I think that we lose sight sometimes in our busy lives of how precious we actually are and what we arise from. And an analogy that I have that I really love is that, you know, we actually ultimately arise from the same stuff that is birthing the stars, that is hurling comets through space. And, you know, we kind of forget that in this human life, but it is actually still the reality. And so kind of making contact with that is kind of one of the overarching themes in the book. And I'm not even sure if I'm answering your question anymore.
Yes, you are. I love that, a whole cosmic tie-in with, with being a part of something bigger than yourself. I love that. That does seem like the experience you went through would lead to something big, some big revelation like that. So let's talk about writing.
Let's do that.
Because so many people would like to publish a book, write a book. You say in your bio on your website that you were born a writer, but this is the first time you've formally written something. I connect those two for me.
Sure. Yeah. So I was born a writer. It's something that I've always done. And early on, I wrote letters. I was a child who wrote letters to everybody. I kept journals, and I still have piles of journals. And then when I was about 10 or 11, I actually started writing poetry, which eventually there will be a book of poems.
Wonderful.
And I still consider myself a poet and still do write poetry. But I never felt compelled to get a degree in writing. I wasn't called to study it formally. It just was something I always did and loved to do. And when I was actually in the hospital bed in India, I absolutely knew that I was going to write a book.
Yes.
Didn't realize it would take 9 years to finally birth it.
Yes.
But I knew it was going to be written.
Yeah.
So
You just knew.
yeah. And I actually did write the book within a couple years of India, but the whole process that I went through with it actually took until last year to publish the thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
And tell me a little bit more about that process. So you got it down on paper.
Got it down on paper.
Then where did you go from there? Because I think that would be a hard jump to make.
Right.
Getting it written down, and then what?
Well, so then what? And that's actually a pretty big question. I mean, there's a lot there. So then what? So I wrote a book, and I was determined to publish it. And then I went to New York City thinking I needed an agent, that I needed New York City publishing behind me. Went to this big conference with all of these agents and publishers, and had the wind totally taken out of my sails. Came back with my tail between my legs, put the book down on the shelf for a few years, thinking that I was never going to happen. And then picked it up eventually after somebody read it and said, you have to publish this. They reminded me that I in fact was on this journey with this book, and re-inspired me to get back at it. And so I started the process again, and then I decided I needed to go get a master's degree, so I had to put the book down again. And life continued to happen until finally I'd gotten through the master's degree. I'd sort of started a new career, having become a nurse practitioner after having been a nurse for a long time. And then all of a sudden there was time and space, and it was sort of the right time. And it wasn't good that it required that much time, because the book is now what it wouldn't have been 2 years after India. So it took a little more time, because I continued to work on it and thread things in there.
And from what I hear, 9, 10 years, a lot of people take that long to get that first book done.
So this is the first time I'm hearing this, and this is really nice to hear.
Yes.
That it's
I've
not
heard
just me.
6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and longer to get these done. So the first books. And then, everything else is easy after that. Not. But,
sure.
But that's great. And so when do you mentioned a next book of poetry?
Well, so I have actually well, if I'm going to be honest, there are 3 books that I want to put out. One of them is a book of poetry, and the other book that I don't want to talk about really, this is like the next book. I have content that's already there, and I feel like I'll probably start writing once the weather's a little colder, because summer's my favorite time of the year, and I'm not going to sit indoors and write right now. It's not going to happen. So, but I'm ready to kind of go there. It's still nonfiction. It's not a story though. It's more a diatribe. And I'll just leave it at that. And then this was the third book? Or the third book is actually a children's book.
Oh,
I have a children's book I've always wanted to write, and so
That's wonderful. Okay, that's a nice, well-rounded amount of things to write.
I just need to not have to go to work to do
Well,
these
we
things.
need the weather to get colder to get you to work. You mentioned you love the hot weather. It was fun to see on your website. One of your favorite things to do is not something you can do in Colorado very easily, which is surf.
That is correct.
That's a wonderful
Yeah, it's my favorite
hobby.
thing to do. I'm at my best and happiest when I'm in the salt water on a surfboard, and it's 8 o'clock in the morning.
That's great. That's a good escape. That's a good, well-rounded.
Oh, it's a very good escape.
Thing to do.
Yeah.
So back to writing. I know that a lot of people are struggling with the same things, getting the book done, putting it on the shelf, getting kind of their hopes dashed. Now you belong to an organization that is really helpful with this, and we talk about it every once on the show, CIPA, C-I-P-A. Tell me about your involvement with them and how they've helped you write your book.
CIPA has been instrumental. In fact, if it weren't for CIPA, you and I wouldn't be sitting here together, because that is in fact where we met.
Yes,
right?
yes, that's right.
So SIPA stands for Colorado Independent Publishers Association, and an amazing editor who edited my book by the name of Jody Berman, turned me on to this organization and said, you should get involved. They're very helpful. And so finally, when it was time, I became a member, and they have fabulous meetings. They bring in panels. There's, there are literary awards, which I am happy to say my book has been nominated for 2. So I'll find out later this month.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes.
And anyway, so there's just so much information, guidance, and it's an amazing organization for folks who are independently publishing.
And they have everything to help you with everything publishing, marketing,
everything,
covers.
Yeah. Now I didn't use them for any of that because I found out about them after my book was complete.
Yeah.
But they do. I mean, they have guidance, and they have people they can refer you to for every single part of the process. So highly recommend Colorado Independent Publishers Association if you are in the process of writing a book.
I think that's great. Yeah, they're a wonderful group, and they're just darn nice people too.
They're darn nice people.
They really
very
are.
Down to earth.
The meetings are fun. Even
They're fun.
Learn a lot. I want to ask you about your design for your cover.
Yeah.
I enjoyed just everything about it. Looking at the spine now, it's got a little flourish on it, which is nice.
Yeah.
I'm always curious about covers because
I feel
that's
like this
how
cover's a
people
great story.
Yeah.
It's a good story.
Tell me about your cover. How did you come up with it?
So I had a visual.
Okay.
I had a visual. I could see I could see the sort of the temple in the middle. I had the colors. Like I mean, can you tell what my favorite color is?
Yes,
here?
that's a gorgeous color.
And
yes.
so I had the visual with the colors, and I'm not an artist in that sense. So I found a woman. I interviewed a few people to do the cover, and I sat down with this woman who happens to be a neighbor of mine. And I literally had a piece of paper, and I scratched and sketched the design, and I said, this is what I see, these are the colors I see. And she took the piece of paper, went back to her graphic design computer, and sent me a few sketches saying, is this close? And she made it far more beautiful than I could have imagined it. I mean, she really nailed it and then some.
That's wonderful.
It was just, and she was the most expensive person, for sure. However, I mean, it's a beautiful cover.
It is.
If you don't know anything about the book or about me, if you see that cover, you're going to stop.
Yeah, I agree.
For sure.
So many people. And even the back is well designed and nice. It's not your typical just throw something on the back because nobody looks at that. Yeah. It's really pretty.
Well, thank you.
So, yeah, that's very appealing about the book.
I mean, if you're going to give birth to your first child,
there you go.
She's going to be dressed up.
She's going to be
dressed
up.
Yeah.
I agree. So congratulations on all of that trial and tribulation and getting that done so well.
Thank you.
Let's skip to your website.
Let's do that.
I like your website. It's nice.
Well,
it's clean. It's well done. What can we find when we go to your website?
Well, you can certainly find out a little bit more about me. You can find events that are ongoing, talks that I'm giving. There's a workshop that I'm going to be conducting locally in November that is mentioned on there. And of course, you can find out how to get in touch with me, which I am always open for questions, for continuing conversations. I'm certainly available for appearances or talks. Great. And so any of this is on there.
Do you have Twitter or Facebook or anything like that?
I do. It's Molly Kate Brown Author is my Facebook name.
Okay, great.
And so that is there. And I'm still learning how to use Twitter.
Yeah.
And so I do have an account, but you're not going to find me on it at all.
Yeah. And you mentioned a talk that you do, and it's called Facing Ourselves. There's a subtitle in there. You can help me out with that.
Facing ourselves and basically allowing what is. So it's sort of it's somewhere between a retreat and a workshop. It's only a day long, and the cost for it at this point is $20, and that's only to cover the cost of the room. It's a full day. It's in November. It's November 12th, and basically I haven't yet figured out how to sort of put this into a nutshell, but we're going to be exploring some of these things that I've mentioned, such as I feel like we are a lot more than we take ourselves to be. And in our daily lives, the mental piece of us is kind of running the show. And there are a lot of patterns that are well worn in the grass that we travel down with that. And if we can learn how to do something a little different with our awareness, there's a lot there to discover. And so I think that the capital self, the self with a capital S, has a lot to teach us. And so we're going to kind of go there. There's definitely going to be a little meditation instruction. There's going to be some interaction with other participants, because we're ultimately not in this alone, even though we're on our own path. We're here together, and I think that's very much for a reason. And so, we're going to explore a lot of these things, and also really get into discomfort, because I think since we spend a lot of time avoiding discomfort in our lives, we ultimately are avoiding ourselves, and there's a lot there that we gain from being with discomfort.
You're going to cover all that in one day?
Well, we're gonna touch on all of that in one day, and then eventually maybe we'll do it in more days.
Longer. It sounds like a lot of the themes. Oh, yes.
We'll write a book.
Oh, there you go. There you go. There, and then everybody can have it.
That's actually the next book.
That'll be great. Oh, fabulous. Oh, good. We got a little insight there.
There you go.
It sounds like a lot of the themes you talk about are the same ideas of what we talked about you learned on this experience that you had in India.
Yes.
About being outside yourself and you being a part of something bigger. And so that's really wonderful that you were able to turn that into something to share.
And so I just want to take one thing that you just said.
Yes.
And just rephrase that, because you said about being outside of yourself.
Yes.
But ultimately what it is very much being in yourself entirely.
Yeah.
It's going there, for sure.
I need to attend the program and make sure that I
Absolutely.
get
I'd love
it.
to have you.
It sounds wonderful. I can't wait to get your next books and to read them, because I really found your story inspiring, and I find you inspiring.
Well, thank you.
Just so happy that you came on the show and you shared this wonderful information
I'm really
and story
grateful,
with us.
and thank you for having me.
And
thank you
I want
so much.
everybody to go to your website and visit there. Okay?
All right.
Thanks again for being on the show.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank Molly Kate Brown for being on the show and talking with us about her book, Learning to Walk in India, A Love Story. Check your local library for the books that we've talked about on today's show, and join us for more next time on Off the Page.